a huge hill they want to learn. Everybody ready? Absolutely, yeah.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Let me call to order the meeting of the Merrimack Planning Board for September 3rd, 2019. 2019, not 20,000. 2019. Moved us ahead a couple of tens of thousands of years. We have a quorum. Let me remind everybody that we'll address the board to please sign in and use the microphone. Make sure it's turned on and you speak clearly into it. Our next planning board meeting after tonight is September 17th, 2019 at 7 p.m. in this Matthew Thornton room. I see no other items on our announcement list, and so with that, let's turn to the Planning and Zoning Administrator's report. Tim.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a brief reminder that now that Zina is no longer with us and I do not yet have a replacement recording secretary, please try to be clear with your motions and identify who's making them because between myself and my secretarial staff, we're going to try to put the minutes of this meeting together in the next few days. So we'd greatly appreciate your cooperation on that end. Another good note, we have finalized the process for hiring a new assistant planner. I'm pleased to announce that Casey Wolf, resident of Manchester, will be starting with us on September 30th. She's had some experience in New Hampshire, working for briefly the town of Londonderry and the town of Fremont, currently working in a small town in Massachusetts. She's a relatively young, recent UNH grad, and really looking forward to having her join the team.
Excellent. Good luck, and we look forward to meeting her as well. Comments or questions from members of the board for staff? Bill.
Where in Mass did she work, Tim, do you know?
I don't remember off the top of my head. It's a small town.
Western Mass or within?
It's within, she's commuting from Manchester.
Within
so.
495, okay.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Yes, second follow-up?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Any chance that outreach has been made to Dawn, who does the minutes for the?
Yes. She actually inquired of me if I would be interested in having her do it, and then she looked at her Conservation Commission schedule, realized that the meetings are back-to-back nights, and just can't make it work with all the other minutes from other communities that she's doing. But yeah, she actually broached the idea with Sharon and I about potentially doing it.
She is tremendous.
She subs
Dawn
in.
McMillan is
Yeah.
tremendous. The attention to detail is just second to none, and not to denigrate the minute-taking that the town has experienced, but I can honestly say that within the last, I've been on the town council, this is my ninth year, dramatic improvement in the detail and the level of the minutes for not just the town council, but for some of the other boards in town, so.
I hired her.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. She's a tremendous asset to the community, so.
I hired her. You guys stole her.
Absolutely. We know talent when we see it, Tim. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Bill. Other comments or questions? Alistair.
About a year ago, I think, I raised the issue of what I call banners, these sort of funny flag sort of things waving at filling stations. I noticed the filling station opposite Burger King, which was originally one of the sinners, has in fact increased the number of banners floating. He has got one for an ATM, one for cigars, one for CBD, which is the latest drug medicine I think we're all applying to our skins, and I forget what the other two are. One's for cigarettes and one's for something else. So are we giving up trying to stop this, or do we simply admit
we simply only follow up when we have service requests because I don't have the staff time to go out searching for
All right,
this.
okay. We'll wait till
But we do follow up when we get
you have
service
the third
requests.
staff, I'll raise it again. Thank you.
Thank you, Alistair. Other comments or questions? Tim, the one that I have is just fill in a little detail. When we met last, we had some general discussion about the Municipal Association and their conferences and the process to register for them. And I assume that it's as simple as letting the staff know that we want to go to a particular thing, and they'll handle all of the details.
Correct.
Excellent. Anything else we should know about how to register for what? They have a conference coming up or something that spurred
There's
this
their
conversation.
municipal law lecture series, which used to be a law lecture series, is now a day workshop where they put all their law lectures into a single day. I know that's coming up. There's a variety of other webinars and whatnot. If you were to peruse the NHMA website, you can get access to. I know that my secretarial staff have one has taken the ZBA webinar, and then the planning board webinar is coming up. They're both taking those just to get a little bit more familiar with how things work. So again, the only thing we ask is that if, A, you contact us so we know that you want to register and we can handle it for you, and B, we do that for tracking purposes, because I know the town council is very interested in seeing the utilization from departments and of the NHMA services.
Excellent. For members of the board that may be considering those conferences, it's been a little while since I've attended one, but they're excellent. And they're also a great opportunity to meet some folks from other towns that do what we do and share some experiences with them. In addition to which, this board was fairly proactive in encouraging the town council to rejoin the municipal association, and so feel a little obligated to make use of the fact that you asked for this. Let's go actually, utilize it.
Are you throwing salt in my wound on a particular vote, Mr. Chairman?
No, not at all.
Oh, okay.
I didn't even know how you voted or which way it was. I know that the board felt pretty strongly in various
I'm
conversations.
just following
and
up on
meetings.
what I was told by the town manager.
Well, it's, we all want to make good use of whatever expenditures the town's making, and so if it's a resource that's out there, go ahead and access it. And if you can't make a particular live conference, pay attention to the webinars and other things that might be interesting, useful to you.
Very good.
Is there anything else for the Planning and Zoning Administrator's report by anybody here? Then let's move on to item 3 on our agenda, which is a public hearing on the creation of site plan regulations. And this item is listed on the agenda. The Planning Board will continue the public hearing to consider adoption of separate and updated site plan regulations, which are currently contained as several sections within the subdivision regulations, pursuant to RSA 675-6 and 675-7. It's continued from our August 6, 2019 meeting. Tim, you wanted to bring us up to date on where we are with all of that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. If you recall, for those that were here back on August 6th, we spent a fair amount of time going through section by section. I know Nelson had put together a pretty substantive list of suggestions and areas that were for discussion. I can report that following that meeting, we have incorporated all of those changes. And as well, we have incorporated the final couple of changes and recommendations from Public Works. Those were really regarding monumentation of property lines and clarifying an update to the stormwater section where there's a state regulation that changed from half-inch rainfall to quarter-inch rainfall. So other than that, there really wasn't much from the Public Works Department. I wanted to get those comments from Public Works before a final vote was taken. Now that we have those incorporated, I believe, based on the conversation I've had with Nelson earlier today, we've incorporated all his changes, that he was happy with where things stood. And I think that the board is ready, as long as you're comfortable, to move forward and adopt our new regulations and get them into effect.
Thank you, Tim, for the introduction. As it is noticed on the agenda for a public hearing, let's offer the opportunity for any member of the public or any member of the public who wishes to weigh in on the adoption of this proposed site plan regulation. Are there any members of the public who wish to weigh in? No members of the public, so we'll close the public hearing. How would the board like to proceed after our relatively lengthy discussion at our August 6th meeting? Is there a need to kind of look at some of these details, or is everybody ready to vote now that you've had a red line that you've had a chance to review over the weekend? What is the will of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to, having checked through and having also sat in on the conversation between Mr. Disco and Tim, I would like to propose that we adopt the changes as according to the latest version of the document which was circulated to us.
Motion by Alistair to adopt the updated site plan regulations. Is there a second? Second by Dan. Any discussion? Bill?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Secretary Milnes. Were you comfortable with Nelson's, and I know it's anecdotal, it's third party, but were you comfortable that Nelson was satisfied with the review that we did? And even though he's not here, it's something you'd think he would have supported it tonight?
He was totally satisfied.
Okay.
He went through his recommendations, which we all saw line by line by line, and Tim sat with him, and I was in the same meeting, and we ticked off each of the items. And Nelson, there were one or two things that he didn't realise it wasn't in this part, but it was in this part. Nelson was totally satisfied.
Okay. And I apologize for singling out the member, Mr. Chairman, but his long career serving on the planning board. I just wanted to make sure that the conversations that he had and that he was satisfied. So even though he's not here tonight.
The one section I can say that he wasn't quote-unquote satisfied on was at the last meeting on August 6th, he brought up several items related to the landscaping requirements and how we had completely overhauled how we're going to approach landscaping. And the majority of the board that night was comfortable with that approach.
Right.
So those comments, we didn't go through in any
And that's
detail.
fair, and I remember we've added that, so that's fair, so. Okay, good deal, thank you.
Thank you for raising the issue, Bill, and making sure that that's happened. I also had some communication with Nelson yesterday that seemed to indicate he was satisfied with this draft. Other comments or questions on this? So there is a motion properly seconded to adopt this site plan regulation. If there's no further discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? We have 6 members here today, so that is a 6-0-0 unanimous vote to adopt the site plan regulations.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tim,
Yeah,
for
Tim,
a
thank you.
tremendous amount of work in going through this
Yeah.
stuff. And first, the initiative to separate the site plan and the subdivision regulations and all the work that's gone into it. And also the fact that we've had a couple of chances to meet and talk about it, and that's always adds work to your load. Thank you very much for all of that.
Absolutely.
The next item on our agenda is a similar public hearing, and this is for the amendment of the subdivision regulations. The planning board will continue the public hearing to consider amending the subdivision regulations to remove all sections pertaining to non-residential site plan review pursuant to RSA 675-6 and 675-7. It is continued from our August 6, 2019 meeting. I know that this one is a much simpler amendment because it's simply the separation of them. And Tim, thank you for the indulgence from last meeting. I know it was very late in the evening when we
Sure.
decided not to move ahead with this until we had a chance to think it through a little bit.
Absolutely.
I appreciate it. Please introduce the item and tell us where we're at with it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. This is, as Bob mentioned, pretty straightforward. There are amendments in several sections, primarily simply to remove the information that was required relative to site plans, which now have their own set of regulations as of 3 minutes ago. So if you were to go through the document, it basically, the changes are in section, throughout the document, you'll find changes to the adoption date to the current date of today, assuming that that's what the will of the board is. Under section 2 in definitions, there are a couple of minor modifications, simply to make sure that the definitions that are in both sets of regulations are consistent. So those definitions that are shared between subdivision and site plan regulation that we modified as part of the site plan regulations, we've done likewise and modified those here in the subdivision regs. So that would be definitions for a butter, national pollutant discharge elimination system, official minutes of the board, right-of-way, street, and streets collector. So those are the definitions that were modified so that they are consistent amongst both sets of regulations now. The next set of changes is a formatting change in section 4. That is on page, indulge me for a second here. Page 4-8. It's under section 4.07 for minor subdivisions and lot line adjustments. It's simply taking out brackets and italicized text, which were differentiating what was previously amended back several years ago, which no longer needed to be done. The next set of changes are to section 7, which is the complete elimination of that section, as that was pertaining to non-residential site plans. The next section is section 10 for landscaping. All landscaping requirements relative to non-residential site plans has been removed from there. Section 11 has been eliminated. That was, excuse me 1 second. Section 11 was outdoor lighting, which is now in the site plan regulations. Section 12 for building design has been eliminated. That's now in the site plan regulations. Then section 13, which is the standards for Eltwich Village shops, conditional use permits, that has also been moved to the site plan regulations. So the intent is that these will essentially serve as temporary regulations. I fully expect that within the next 6 to 8 months, I want to do exactly with the subdivision regulations, what we just went through with the subdivision, what we just did with the site plan regulations will happen with the subdivision regulations, modernizing them, putting them in the same format, such that the documents will be consistent and updated for modern standards. Gladly answer any questions anybody has, but really this is simply trying to make sure that we eliminate those sections that are now redundant with the adoption of the site plan regulations.
Thank you for the introduction, Tim. Does anyone have any questions for Tim?
Have we
What's
opened
been
and
done?
closed the hearing? Should we do that
Haven't-
first?
well, Ken, if you want to. Are there any members of the public who wish to weigh in on the adoption of the subdivision regulation amendments? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Does any member of the board have any comments or questions respect to what's been done?
Just the same question I have raised before regarding Nelson, that Nelson was comfortable with the revisions and everything.
Again, because it was simply the elimination of these sections, we didn't go through the same level of detail, but he understands that the sections that were changed were because of the adoption of the new
Okay,
regs.
perfect. Thank you, Tim.
Mr. Chairman, I would therefore, after that, make a motion that we adopt a new
Subdivision.
subdivision regulations as submitted to the board in most recent days.
Is there a second for Alistair's motion?
Second motion.
Second by Paul. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? 600 to adopt those subdivision regulations. Again, and Tim, without getting redundant, I will offer the same thanks as before, and thank you in advance for the forthcoming, or soon-to-be forthcoming, overall amendments to that one.
Well, that set of amendments was really easy. The next set will be a little more challenging.
Hopefully not too much. The more we
Not so
the
much
more frequently we
challenging as
update.
time-consuming.
Thank you for that, and I think that these also, in addition to organizing some things a little bit better, give us a chance to get under the hood and attend to some things that are in our 2013 master plan, which is now almost in its 7th year. So, start time to think about a new master plan.
No.
It's in the CIP.
Not that far away. All right. That concludes item 4 on our agenda. Item 5 on our agenda is Merrimack Parcel A LLC as the applicant and owner. Continued review of an amendment to the previously approved mixed-use site plan for Phase 1 of the Merrimack Park Place project, proposing an additional 32 multifamily residential units and removal of 84,200 square feet of office and restaurant space, specialty retail, and an event center from Phase 1 to be included in a subsequent phase. The parcel is located at 10 Premium Outlets Boulevard in the I-2 Industrial and Aquifer Conservation Districts and Wellhead Protection Area. Tax Map 3C, Lot 191-2. It is case number Planning Board 2019-25. It's also continued from our August 6th meeting. Tim, is there anything that we need to know before we hear from the applicant?
First, let me note that Nelson's arrived.
Nelson has arrived, and I will now appoint him into a voting position for Lynn. He can be down there, right here.
I'm sorry.
No worries.
Don't worry about it.
So that we have 7 voting members now. So Tim, again, is there anything that we need to know before we hear from the applicant?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. As you recall, this was last before the board back on August 6th, where the applicant gave their presentation regarding the proposed amendments to the first phase of the site plan for for Merrimack Park Place. The peer review has been completed, and a lot of those comments have been addressed to the satisfaction of staff, and we are in a position now where we feel like the board can make a we can recommend the board take a vote for conditional approval later tonight. There are a couple of items that were outlined in Robert's memo that specifically we wanted the board to take a look at regarding truck turning movements. Our peer review consultant has commented about WB 67 trucks, which are the 73.5-foot long trucks, and some potential issues with navigating the site. However, the site is able to handle WB 50 trucks, which is a 55-foot truck, which is typically, in my experience, what site plans are designed for. So the board should discuss that information with the applicant. The applicant has provided, and in your packets, you'll find a turning template sheet for the WB50 to show that WB50 vehicles can traverse the site without any issues. Secondly, with regard to the sidewalk details, both the peer review and Public Works have requested that the sidewalk construction detail call for 12 inches of bank run gravel as opposed to the 8 inches of crushed gravel that is proposed by the applicant. Public Works is offering a compromise position such that And I will note that the number I'm going to tell you is a DOT spec for gravel, crushed gravel for construction. Public Works would be okay with 8 inches of 304.3 gravel if the sidewalks are made of concrete. However, if, as proposed currently, the applicant wants to move forward with asphalt sidewalks, Public Works is recommending 12 inches of that 304.3 material. So the board should give some direction to the applicant after discussion as to which direction you want to go with that. Outside of that, I think the majority of comments and concerns that were raised and by peer review have been satisfactorily addressed, and we'll offer the opportunity for the applicant to present.
Thank you, Tim. Please remind me when we get to the public comment section. I've received a website contact form from Beth Burns, who's not able to be here tonight, and I want to make sure to include that in the recitation of information that we do for the public hearing. I also forwarded that to you by email so that you've got it, although I just did it a minute ago. And so remind me when we're doing the public hearing to summarize that for the board, or actually read it. It's very short for the board. With that, please introduce yourself and tell us where we're at with the project.
Is this on, right?
Sounds good.
There we go. Okay. Good evening. Dave Fenstermacher from VHB. We're the civil engineers on the project. And I think Tim did a good job summarizing where we stand. I just wanted to add to that. On August 19th, we were presented to the Conservation Commission, and we had no issues at that meeting, and we're able to advance accordingly. We really just carried over a lot of the comments from the previous approvals with them. So what we have up here is, this is still the older board. I can bring up the other plans as needed, but what I wanted to do is sort of walk through, there was quite a bit of information in the response to comment, but I really just wanted to highlight of some of the site changes just to clarify what those are. And one of the first things I just wanted to lead off with, because it wasn't in the comment letter, but it was something that was left hanging. I think Nancy, one of the abutters, asked us last time that we were going to confirm the berm that's up by the roundabout, and we just wanted to confirm that our design does incorporate a berm that is going to be between 7 and 10 feet. It's out there now. We're not touching it, so we wanted to confirm that. So when you're coming around the bend, we're at about elevation 215. That berm is between 225 and 228. So we're going to have significant berm to help with the headlight glare. And I just wanted to clarify that because we didn't have that answer the last time. A few of the things that we focused on in terms of site plan changes, a lot of it had to do with ADA and circulation and pedestrian accessibility. So what we didn't provide the last time was a connection between the apartments and the clubhouse. So when you see the new plans, we've added ADA ramps and crosswalks to provide access to these two locations. The Fuss O'Neill plans clarified some of the needs for the ADA parking where it's not based on the total. We wanted to make sure we had enough per use. Clarified that there were ADA under the buildings to reach the appropriate number for the apartments, and then we addressed their comments at the hotel to add a space over there. Stop control was another one where we just wanted to enhance a little bit, added some stop bars, some stop signs, just to really improve the safety and circulation there. And snow storage was another one. So we coordinated snow storage with the landscaping and lighting to make sure those were cleared up. And then the final piece, I don't know if it was the board or the police, where just wanted to add more lighting. So we added some wall packs to the back of the building to make sure that that emergency egress and the walkway back there had appropriate lighting. And the other ones were pretty straightforward, detail comments to clarify details for construction level, which we implemented. And the pending ones really are, for stormwater, as you can see, phase 1 is significantly less than what the AOT permit's for. There's not an issue there, but we're just clarifying and pulling together the updated drainage report and calculations that send back to AOT. So that will be shared with the town once those are complete, but those are getting close as well. So if there's any more comments tonight, we'll implement those, but if not, those will be ready to send over to the state and the town for review. So I think that, we went through the conditions, everything seemed appropriate and things that we can address. And I don't think there was anything too controversial to discuss. So
Tell me your thoughts on this question about the gravel under the sidewalks, and what are the two choices, and why you're advocating for one and the town sort of disagrees, or the
yeah, we'll just have,
peer review.
we could work, it's not an issue. We took our detail from our past approvals, and that was received comments on that detail. So we originally were just trying to be consistent with the details, because we have some, sidewalk tying into previous sidewalk, but it's not an issue with, I think we just want to clarify with the Public Works, their comment did referenced a detail on a sheet, but it wasn't specific to what detail it was. So if the 12, we'll go with whatever the Public Works is.
My understanding is that between Robert and Don, they were unable to find the detail in the premium outlet plans that
Okay.
showed.
All right. So we do have those if we need them, but I think the final answer is, yeah, whatever Public Works wants to see, that's what we'll implement into the plans.
Okay. Members of the board, let's open it up for any comments or questions you may have. Nelson?
Yeah. A couple of things. Last time when we reviewed this plan, we made some comment about what we were going to do with that empty space. It's not shown grassed or seeded or anything, and we know there's piles of earth there now.
Yeah.
I want to know what the condition is going to be until such time as the next phase of this is implemented.
Yeah, the intent is, I think, as we discussed last time, it's not only for the beautification and aesthetics of the neighbors, it's also for who's going to be on site as well. So the intent is to loam and seed.
Okay, I think that should be called out in the plan somewhere. I didn't
Okay.
find it, if it's there.
It's on the landscape plan. So sheet L1 should have that labeled.
Okay.
Yeah, if
It
he's
does say, on
does-
L1, it does say loam and seed.
above the parking area there.
Yeah, it does.
It's essentially flat, right? It's not, there's not piles.
Yeah, we're not going to loam and seed the piles. We're going to.
Yeah, okay.
I think the piles are actually in the area you're gonna do construction in. They're actually not in
Right.
the piles that are there today are in the construction zone, not in the leave it alone zone.
Not in the Phase 2 area.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I just wanted to clarify that and make it clear. The other thing was, we had asked last time about fire review. I think that was still pending. Has that been taken care of now, fire department?
And I think we had met with the fire department before, and that's where we came up with the emergency access around the building. So it was my understanding that they were all set.
We have an okay from them, okay. And the only other thing I wanted to ask about, well, the truck turning, have we discussed that, this issue with the truck turning radius?
Tim introduced it, but Dave hasn't had a
Yeah.
chance to address it yet, and I think
So-
we understand where we're at with it.
Yeah, I
but-
think what we came down to is we've designed this for the max truck size that would be being used on site, as well as emergency vehicles. And the WB 67, which is the big dog, that doesn't work on the site. But with the apartments and the hotel and the restaurant, it's not a design vehicle that they'll be accessing the site. So that's something that it will be restricted between Lacessi. They'll coordinate any larger deliveries, and Mr. Monahan will be operating the hotel and the restaurant. So that's things that can be controlled from an operational standpoint.
You have any problem? I think our engineer recommended a sign. I don't know if that.
Yeah, at this point, we could add the sign. Where it's on a roundabout, I thought restricting a truck would potentially cause some confusion as it's heading up.
From staff, from my perspective, I do not see the need to do a sign as long as it's operationally handled. And as I think I've mentioned before, I cannot recall in my time here in Merrimack any site having comments regarding a WB 67, nor can I remember in the 11 years I worked in a different community, any comments from a peer reviewer about a WB 67 designed for a site other than industrial.
If it's, yeah,
But for
maybe
a site like this, I just don't know where the comment came from.
We've
to be
done them
honest with
for
you.
Lowe's, and
Yeah.
that's about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
This, the moving trucks, everything else that we've checked works fine throughout the site.
For the 50s.
The 50s,
50s,
yep.
yeah.
So the 50s
Yeah,
is the
yeah.
reasonable size.
Okay, and one other thing I wanted to ask about was the sidewalk, as it appears on the plans, seems to make use of a couple of, it seems to discontinue and then restart. If you just look at the plan and look at the sidewalk,
Oh, the one that goes behind the building?
the one behind the buildings and then the one across on the, I guess on the east side of the property. I don't recall seeing it there either.
Yeah, so this sidewalk comes down, and I think
It doesn't show on the plan, that's,
that this one, yeah, there's a sidewalk on both sides. This one is the main pedestrian one that's on the interior. This is the larger, I think it's a 10-foot? 12-foot, that comes down, that goes to the emergency access. I think
Yeah.
this one is kind of coordinated with fire and police to be a little bit wider. And this does connect, it doesn't show it here, but this connects around the corner to the existing sidewalk, and then it'll connect back in here. And we're trying to just limit the amount of disturbance, so we're gonna have this little used porous pavement access for the fire truck, so we're just gonna tie into that, and that's gonna double as a path, a sidewalk and a,
that, I figured that was your intention, but it doesn't show that way on the plan, and I just wanted it to be clear that the intent here is to have a loop sidewalk.
it's
for
a loop,
people,
yep.
And be walkable all the way. It doesn't necessarily need to be paved, but it needs to be accessible, walkable, and
Yes,
cleared. And
yep, and these are all areas that are to be cleared,
Yeah.
so, yeah, so it is a full loop, on site.
Maybe a note to that effect or something
Okay.
would be effective.
I think,
Yeah.
Nelson, I want to add something to your comment. You mentioned doesn't need to be paved. I'm not sure I agree with that. I think let's
Okay.
pave it.
No, it's all paved.
Oh, I didn't realize the emergency route was paved.
It is, it's a porous pavement.
Oh, it is?
Yep.
And the same with the route across at the east end of the property?
This is all, that's gonna be all sidewalk, concrete sidewalk.
Yeah, no, I'm up at the emergency access road, that road there, across,
Yeah,
there,
that's
right where
paved.
you are now.
Yeah, that's the existing roadway, that's there now.
Is that paved?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's been there for a while.
Okay. I'm happy then. No problem.
It's an important thing because of, you're getting into handicap access or anyone that has any difficulty with mobility, or you just want to maintain it.
Yeah.
Paved is the only real viable alternative for that.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think I want to echo Nelson's comments about the trucks. I think that the uses of the property make sense that a WB50 is a more than sufficient design standard, and
Yep.
designing it to a WB67 is an unusual call out and request. And although I can think of a particular warehouse and a particular truck stop that had bigger truck turnings, that's not what this is. And we have an infinite number of sites that can't maneuver a
Probably have an infinite
67.
amount of roads that I can't. Right.
Probably do. I wonder why it's the first time that we've seen such a call out, but it is what it is. I also agree with Tim. I don't see the necessity of a sign, mostly because I'm not sure what you put on a sign that says you can have a 55-foot truck but not bigger.
Right.
Who?
Yeah, I think it just causes a confusion point if a truck is coming around and you want them to read a sign about if they're allowed or not within a roundabout.
Plus, by the time they get to that point, their nose is already in
They're in.
there, and you can't back out of it at that point anyway. So,
Mm-hmm.
Nelson, I didn't mean to cut you off. If you had more comments, I'm sorry.
No, I'm just about finished. I just wanted to know, was there a recommendation from our engineer regarding a pedestrian crossing study for the crossing of
think that was from
Continental
Public
Boulevard? Is that
Works.
in our Is that in our recommendation?
public-
The
work
Public Works
Public
proposed
Works.
condition, their comment is a traffic study should be conducted to address whether a pedestrian crossing, signage, or lights from the project to Dunkin' Donuts and the restaurant across Continental are warranted. As I made mention, I worked with Robert's language at the top of page 2 when we're talking about that pedestrian crossing. I noted that, and remind the board, that the overall traffic generated by this project for both phases of the conditional use permit is less than was originally anticipated and approved by the board when the premium outlets was approved, both due to the change in the ITE trip generation rates to the latest 10th edition, and due to the elimination of office and specialty retail uses from this phase. Traffic will be re-examined as part of the site plan review process under the new regulations when Phase 2 comes forward, so there's an opportunity at that point. And as I think I previously stated, I don't know how you do a pedestrian traffic study because ITE doesn't have generation rates for pedestrians. So short of, and since there's no justification to warrant reopening the traffic study as a whole, I don't know how you get to the point of doing a pedestrian study.
It's worthy of some discussion by the board in general. I think that I want to caution us into not innovating while an applicant's project is there on the table in front of us. If we want to know more about the idea of pedestrian trip generation, we can have NRPC or somebody offer some education, and we can think about how that might fit into future regulations. But it isn't ever fair to an applicant to come up with something all new and creative while they're on the operating table in front of us.
I agree with that, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to bring it to the board's attention and to the public's attention and to put it on our to-do list. It's something to think about for the future.
I think it's an excellent suggestion, and I remember some of the work that we had NRPC do along the DW corridor, and they knew a way of understanding levels of pedestrian stress and bicyclist stress based on speed limits and dimensions and those kinds of things. That may be always useful to know. However, since it isn't something that we've had a chance to build into our regulations, I think take it under advisement and think about it for the future, but in this particular project. But I also don't intend to offer that comment as a way of shutting down anybody else that's got different comments to make about this particular intersection. Does anyone have any thoughts about a crosswalk across Continental Boulevard to Dunkin' Donuts?
Just
and-
add my 2 cents, given the general nature of a Dunkin' Donuts facility, I would not anticipate that there would be a very big pedestrian demand to get to Dunkin' Donuts, simply because the typical Dunkin' Donuts customer is the person in their car commuting to work on the way in the morning, who's going to go through the drive-through, and it is an automobile-oriented site. I just don't see that there would be sufficient demand, if there was even a way of measuring demand, other than anecdotally, that a crosswalk would be warranted for that type of pedestrian traffic.
Plus, if somebody really wants to walk to get a coffee, they can walk up the hill a little bit where there's Starbucks. I mean, I know I'd prefer Dunkin' Donuts coffee, but I'm just making a point.
Nothing against Starbucks, it's not a comparable product. Those are two different markets. It may be perfectly good. I'm not saying that it's
No,
lesser
I
or
don't.
greater. They don't compete in the same market. I think that it's also worth noting that even if we were to do a bit of a study here and try and figure it out, crossing at this particular point would be a particularly complicated engineering undertaking, being 4 lanes of state-controlled highway without sidewalks to join into on the other side, and phasing into lights, and we know what those have cost and the proposals have been like for that.
Well, that was the comment that I had made at our last hearing when I asked the applicant to Mr. Monahan whether or not he was engaging in the state to explore putting in a crosswalk based on the fact that the state, the DOT owns Continental Boulevard. So, you know, that's an,
If I were a
That is an onerous process in and
gambling
of
man,
itself.
I'm going to say the state wouldn't allow it.
oh, of course not. But how long do you think it would take them for them to say we're not going to allow it? That's the real question.
My understanding is that the state's actually fairly proactive in incorporating pedestrian facilities in otherwise vehicle-oriented road developments, but not simply developing projects that are pedestrian-only on top of other things. With that said, I don't want to, keep beating this horse on pedestrians for this particular site. If the board has a comfort level with not adopting the Public Works Department's proposed condition of approval.
It can be incorporated into whoever makes the motion.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Other comments or questions? We've still yet to do a public hearing, and we can hear some input from folks who may want to, and I can provide the feedback that we received through the website contact form. Any other comments or questions?
No other comments at this time.
We certainly can have another opportunity to do that. Are there any abutters or interested citizens who wish to weigh in on this project as the board considers it? I can offer up the website contact by Beth Burns, who we know is an abutter to the property. The concern that she raised is relative to some recent discussion and perhaps news about opioid crisis and its relation to hotel developments, or one particular hotel development in town. And she asked that the board consider and discuss that. And my observation is that those are not just hotel developments, those are a unique kind of hotel that isn't the same as what's being proposed here, which is the extended stay cash customer hotels seem to be the two that have the unique issues with the opioid crisis and the cooperation with the police, and that's not what's proposed here. But I'll let the applicant respond to that, and also any member of the board raise questions.
Point of
as well.
order, Mr. Chairman, could Beth Burns' letter, doesn't need to be read in, but could it be incorporated into the record for the minutes of this meeting?
Certainly could be, and I don't mind reading it into the record. It's only a few sentences.
We could do that. Typically, what we do is we make reference to it being in the project file in the minutes.
Okay. Because
So-
I did receive the same email, Mr. Chairman, in the interest of transparency.
I also, Mr. Chairman, am transparent.
I can, I think I probably basically did read it all, but as has been noted by members of the police department, the opioid crisis has paid a visit to existing hotels we have in this town. It's an even deeper concern with a proposed hotel being built near our homes. I understand people are the crisis and things happen, but the drug epidemic is a deep concern as it is. We need to keep this in mind in the hotel being built on the proposed site. Safety and the effort of preventing harm is appreciated and should be taken into account. And that can be incorporated into the record and referenced in the minutes. Dave, do you want to add anything to the general?
No, I think I just agree with you in general that this is a different type of hotel than maybe what's been referenced, but it's hard to say where things happen and where they don't. But I understand Mr. Monahan's going to be operating this, and I'm sure he'll have a top flight management crew and security and all that to kind of maintain.
Certainly
that
encourage
level
him
of
to work
safety.
directly with the police department to prevent anything from even starting.
Exactly.
Yep. Some of the features that the police department is looking for cooperation, and we hope that they're consistent with the plan for the hotel, includes not just sort of lighting and security cameras and kind of monitoring your property, but more than anything else, identifying your customers, who they are with identification cards and credit cards for payment. And so the customers who you can't identify, who might come in and pay cash, tend to be the source of some police work. And we'd like to help and have that kind of coordination and cooperation with the police. And I'm sure that we have it, but I'll let you say it for the record.
Yeah, this isn't that important for me to say something, but Tom Monahan, owner of the property, and gonna be we will own the Marriott. It will be operated by a professional group, one of the best in the country. And I read the same article, saw it. I have had earlier on, actually a year ago, with Chief Roy discussing it. I am also the chairman of the Southern Hillsborough County Drug Court, which, so we know what's going on. We see a lot of it. It's of critical importance, and not only will I not allow it, but Marriott as well, who is the franchisor, we have some strict requirements that we have to adhere with them, and we plan on doing that. And it is different. We are not a cash hotel. We don't rent rooms by the hour, and which has been the case in some hotels in southern New Hampshire, and that is not, this is catering to not only the outlet folks on the weekends, but also the great industries that southern New Hampshire, including Merrimack, in the close vicinity. We've already discussed arrangements with many of the industries, so we want this to be the best, not and cater only. This is a as this whole development is, including the outlets, it's a legacy project for our family, and it's very important that we maintain the integrity of the development.
Thank you for saying so. Thank you for taking the time to make a special comment. I think we kind of understood that to be the case in any case, but I'm glad to have you state it. And I look forward to the opportunity with some of these other hotels where they'll be before us to say similar things about how they're going to begin cooperating with police in the future.
This conversation regarding the hotel did spur a reminder in my brain that one thing that we did not find in the set and didn't make into the comments was the elevations of the hotel building itself. We have the apartment buildings in here, but the hotel elevation should be in as well.
Thank you, Tim, for remembering that. It's true, we do have those elevations in the back. I opened the public hearing and I included Miss Burns' comments. I don't know if there's any other butters who wish to weigh in, and if not, then we will close the public hearing. Anyone? No others? Okay. Additional comments by members of the board and discussion.
I'm all set, Mr. Chairman.
If there are no additional comments, then what's the will of the board with respect to the proposal?
Before someone makes a motion, I just want to spell out that based on the discussion I've heard so far, that proposed condition 10C would be eliminated regarding the traffic study and the pedestrian crossing of Continental, and that we would add a condition relative to adding the elevation drawings for the hotel in the plan set.
Excellent. Does any of the conditions regarding responding to the comments of VHB, not VHB, of Fuss and O'Neill have to be amended so that we're not requiring the 67-foot truck?
Yep.
Okay. With that, what is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we approve this application with, as conditional final approval, along with the conditions specified in the memo dated August the 28th, prepared for us by Mr. Robert Price, including the changes that our Community Development Director has just outlined, referring to 10C being eliminated, and a requirement that they provide us with an elevation of the hotel.
Seconded.
Any further discussion? Motion by Alistair, second by Councilor Boyd. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? So that is 7-0-0 to grant conditional final approval. Thank you for the presentation and for all of the work to get through the process.
I'm sorry, who was the second? I missed that.
Bill
Oh,
Boyd.
thank you.
Thank you for clarifying that. Okay, next item on our agenda is item number 6, which is the John Flatley Company as the applicant and Gilbert Crossing LLC and John J. Flatley as the owner. Continued review for consideration of amendment to a previously approved mixed-use development conditional use permit. The parcels are located at 645, 673, 685, 703, and 707 Daniel Webster Highway in the I-1 Industrial and Aquifer Conservation and Wellhead Protection Districts. Tax map 6E, lot 31, 33, 34, 35, and 36. It's case number Planning Board 2019-27. It is continued from our August 20th, 2019 meeting. And having read it into the record and introduced it before I turn over to Tim, or I'll let at least Alistair do that, I will recuse myself and go sit in the audience. All yours, Mr.
Thank you,
Vice Chair.
sir. Would you like to introduce it, Bill, with Tim, with whatever changes that we've got?
Thank you, Mr.
We never got at the last meeting due to a lack of a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the board. In your packet, you'll have my memo for that previous meeting, dated August 15th. The proposal before you is another proposed amendment to the conditional use permit for the John J. Flatley Gilbert Crossing conditional use permit, mixed-use project. The proposal for this amendment is to modify those uses that were previously retail and restaurant to be located in front of the existing Saint-Gobain Performance Plastics facility, to change those into more industrial flex uses. In doing so, they are requesting that the board modify the condition that the pedestrian connection from residential be made to that section of the property. And then likewise, they're also requesting that the board consider amending the phasing of the project to allow the 5th residential building to be constructed prior to commencement of the non-residential development on the property. There is, in the memo, a couple of items that I've asked be provided. Number one, an updated fiscal impact analysis with the changes to the uses, which I did not have until about 4:30 this afternoon. Obviously, I have not had an opportunity to review that before the meeting here tonight, and will take the opportunity to do so. My recommendation at the end of this will ultimately be to continue out 2 weeks to the September 17th meeting. Likewise, if the board is comfortable with making these types of changes, there will need to be an amended development agreement put together for this that would modify the phasing and requirements associated with phasing for the pedestrian connection and the 5th residential building. So in general, I would concur with the applicant's position that if those uses are modified and changed from commercial to industrial, it does not make sense to have a pedestrian connection going to an industrial facility from apartments. So I would be supportive of that. My support is conditional, of course, based on ensuring that following review of the fiscal impact analysis, we do still maintain a positive fiscal impact of the project in all phases. I know that I mentioned to Mr. Walker when he dropped off the fiscal impact this afternoon that I would be looking for that fiscal impact, the conclusion, to be broken out by phase before I'm comfortable making a formal recommendation on that. So that's, in a nutshell, where we're at.
Thank you very much, Mr. Thompson. Mr. Walker, please introduce yourself and your colleague alongside you, both of whom we know both of you, but for the record, and then explain to us what you're proposing.
Sure. Kevin Walker from the John Flatley Company. With me is Chad Brannon from Fieldstone Land Consultants. In the back is the property owner, John Flatley. Recall last time we were here, we were continued. There was not a quorum. So we are here to present the revised overall plan, development plan. I also have, that I could hand out to the board if they'd like. I have the, as Tim mentioned, the fiscal impact statements, and I do have a summary that I can run through really quickly with you after.
Please run through the summary, yes.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I'm sure we'd like the copies as well, but when you finish.
Sure.
But please give us a quick bird's eye view of what it's going to be.
Do you want the fiscal first, or you want,
No, let Mr. Brannon do what the changes are, and then we'll have the fiscal.
let him work his magic?
Okay, good evening, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Chad Brannon, civil engineer with Fieldstone Land Consultants. What I'd like to do is, it's been some time since we had this plan before the board. I know we were here about 6 months ago talking about some modifications to the commercial elements of the project and the connectivity. But just to kind of give an overview of the project that was approved, or the conditional use permit that was approved back in September of 2015, the current conditional use permit for the property consists of 5 multifamily residential buildings, which are comprised of 240 units, and that's situated on the south side of the project in this area here. The remainder of the site was approved for 296,000 square feet of commercial retail space. 180,000 square feet of it was here. If you recall, we had a big box retail space, and then we also had a 8,000 square foot restaurant building as well. And then we had 20,000 square feet of commercial retail on the northern corner of the site. On top of that, we had, well, actually, in the middle here, we also had a retail space. So we had essentially retail space all the way across this western side of the property here. And then we had 120,000 square feet of the high bay industrial space. What we're proposing to do, and if you may, Mr. Chairman, I'm just going to.
Please do. Grab yourself the mobile mic if you want it.
I can do it from the table, but
All right, whatever suits you best.
So what we're proposing with this amendment to the conditional use permit is to maintain the 5 multifamily residential buildings. 4 of those are currently under construction. As everybody knows, the project's known as Gilbert Crossing. And I think that, I would hope that everybody can see that it's progressing quite well and is looking very nice as you travel along Daniel Webster Highway. What we're proposing to do is to reconfigure this portion of the commercial space to be very similar to the layout that we had west of the St. Cobain site, smaller retail boxes. We haven't finalized that layout yet, but we're looking at about 180,000 square feet of retail potentially in that area. Obviously, some of the details for that have to come together still. We are proposing to maintain the commercial space on the northern section of the site, so that would be another 20,000 square feet of space there. And then this area, essentially from the pond on the site and the old hatchery, all the way north to the St. Cobain entrance, we'd be proposing this area here as a industrial flex site. I think in evaluating the climate and the market for this area, my clients determined that this would be a very productive use for the property. And so we're showing that that area be developed into approximately 101,200 square feet of industrial flex site. We have modified the parking layout and the circulation to meet all of the regulations, and we're showing that conceptually, obviously, on the conditional use permit plan, the master development plan. We have not changed anything with any of the access points from the project. We're maintaining all of the same locations that were previously approved here, and obviously also through DOT. So we're maintaining that, and we're certainly maintaining all of the services to the property as far as being connected to municipal sewer and Merrimack Village District for water and so on. Also being maintained on this plan would be the 120,000 square foot high bay industrial building as well. This particular layout, we don't believe this particular layout warrants, the vehicular connection here. We are still planning on having connectivity, vehicular connectivity and pedestrian connectivity to the adjacent commercial space that we're currently working on. So I think that would be consistent with the objectives and goals of the prior conditional use permit. There still would be some pedestrian connectivity along the Daniel Webster Highway corridor, just because that's required in general with all projects here.
Yep.
So we would still maintain that, that use, if you will. So that's really, just a summary of the amendments that we're proposing for the project. We really wanted to come before the board and get your feedback before we, worked on finalizing some modifications to the development agreement. I know Mr. Walker will address some of the fiscal impact stuff, but one of the things that we really wanted to key in on with this modification is getting the authorization to build that 5th building for a couple of reasons. The development has been quite popular, and it's reserving as fast as the buildings are being constructed. And to be sensitive to the residents in that development, it would be nice to build that 5th building at the same time so that the project would be completed at once. But also, I think in talking with Mr. Flatley and certainly with Mr. Walker and the discussions we've had with staff, we understand that if we can present to the board and to the town that the fiscal impact report has a positive impact, even if we adjust the phasing, that has been supported in the past. So that is the direction that we've taken with this project. That's part of the reason why we have the fiscal impact report available this evening. So with that, I think it's appropriate to hand the floor over to Mr. Walker, and he can go through some
I
of
guess
those
it
numbers.
is, yes. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you. Just go through, I guess I'll go through the occupancy to date at this point, and then I'll break down the fiscal impact from the apartments and the remainder of the site.
Okay.
And well, I believe I was a little surprised when I went through it myself, but let's go through it. So at this point, yeah, sure. At this point, we've got 4 buildings that we have under construction. That's 192 units. To date, we have about 98 units leased, and which is about 51, a little over 51% already leased. Currently, the only occupancy permit is for the first building, Building 1. Again, it's 48 units. It's full. We have 1 model unit. The other 47 are occupied.
That's excellent.
The second building is, we have 29 out of 48 leased. That's not due until, I want to say, October 1st or maybe mid-October. The third building, we have 13 out of 48 units. And the fourth building, which isn't going to be until next year, we've already got 9 out of 48.
Hallelujah.
So the need is clearly there. It's moving along pretty quickly, and it's pretty active. I was up there for a couple hours this afternoon, and there were quite a few people walking through the door requesting, a look at the model and whatnot. So as far as the need, we clearly see there's a need. So I'll leave that as far as that goes right there. Just to break down the fiscal impact report that was just handed out, and again, Tim mentioned he just got it. I understand that everybody needs to take some time to look through it. So I broke down the expenses and other revenue for the apartments, as well as the expenses for the apartments. And for the total of the 5 apartments, there's a net positive impact of $557,548, which is roughly $111,510 per building. For the remainder of the site, which is everything except the apartments, the net positive impact is $296,385, which is just under half of the positive impact for the apartments. So tax-wise, whether it's real estate taxes or it's vehicle taxes, that type of thing, the town's getting much more bang for their buck with the apartments. This took into account, so part of this report has police impact, fire impact, ambulance impact,
School impact?
school impact. We put in a number for general fund. And so we had numbers. We have a 3-year count in this report for police calls for apartments and all the other uses that are shown on the site. Same with fire. And those numbers were basically calculated out based on the percentages used, which is how I came up with the numbers I just presented to you.
I got it. Mm-hmm.
With the exception of the school costs, which obviously 100% of that is the apartments, obviously.
Yes.
But basically broke down 50% of the calls were a split for the ambulance costs, a 50% split for general fund costs. The fire department calls were 38% for the apartments, 62% for the remainder of the site. And the police calls were just under 12% for police for police calls versus a little over 88% for the remainder of what would be the remainder of the site. So all of that was taken into account, the numbers I gave you. Again, the net positive impact for the apartments in whole is 557,548, and the net positive impact for the remainder of the site is 296,385. So we believe it's pretty clear, numbers don't lie, that the town will definitely benefit a lot more having the apartments built versus, full build out of the remainder of the site at this point. And again, I understand Tim has to review it, which we look forward to. I'm be happy to talk with him as he goes through it. And the development agreement, we'll obviously work on. I've started working on a revision. I'll probably try to have something to Tim by the end of the week based on this meeting. And we're probably going to have, we're obviously going to have one more meeting and then maybe tighten it up after that meeting.
Okay.
So, if anybody has any questions, feel free.
Based on your first apartment, which you say is now full, could you indicate to us then how many children you've got in? Or I know it's not sort of I'm sort of off the cuff. How many? Are there a lot of kids or very few kids?
I don't have a number on that.
I can tell you there were 3 kids at the bus stop when I drove by this morning.
Oh, there you go.
It was, I was driving by probably about 7:45.
That's the juniors. In other words, that's the elementary and upper elementary, but not the high school, middle school.
I can get a number.
It was
board.
more of interest to sort of, because it gives me faith in what you're saying. Because I know that if you're mainly 1- and 2-bedroom apartments, there aren't too many kids in them.
No, and that's pretty much how the apartments in Nashua are too. It's a very small number of school-age kids.
I'll remind the board, the multiplier that we use is a statewide multiplier. Housing Finance uses multifamily units where you have 5 or more units on the property. The multiplier is 0.17 school-age children per unit. And based on the developments we've seen in town, we're actually seeing rates lower than that.
That's because nobody's building 3-bedroom apartments, which people want. That's just a passing comment. Okay, thank you for both gentlemen for what you've told us. I'd like to, my colleagues, have you got any comments? Nelson?
Well, I'll start off with that one. I think that I would like to see his numbers, the actuals. I think, I understand your ratios and I understand the state's metrics and so on, but I'd still like to see those numbers. So thank you.
But we can hardly expect Mr. Walker to win somebody else.
I would not ask Mr. Walker to do that. I would get those directly from the school district, as I have for other, when I did my.
Well, thank you, Tim. If you could give us.
It's going to be part of my review of the analysis.
That's very useful.
It's a spot check.
Thank you.
Okay.
Nelson?
The other thing about the police impact that you quoted there for the apartments, what was the basis for that?
So as part of the fiscal impact study, let me just flip to the page here. Mark Fougere, who put together the fiscal impact report, basically talked to the police, went through 3 years of their records.
You took them from Merrimack Records?
Yes.
Okay.
And other communities, not
And
just
Well,
Merrimack.
not just Merrimack.
You've got Bedford.
Similar developments for the apartments.
Yeah.
Because Merrimack doesn't have a lot of apartment calls, a lot of apartments to really put a good solid number on. So they came from Merrimack, Bedford, Nashua, Somersworth.
And Amherst.
And these are the same that were peer-reviewed and approved in the previous approval.
Right, in
Yes.
2015.
Correct.
They were peer-reviewed, and it's important to point out that there was a contact made locally, and the numbers were shared locally, the assumptions, and, the local officials agreed with, the means and methods for generating these numbers. And I think that was obviously
That's correct.
evident in the local review at the time.
Who did the peer review for the town?
We used Arnett Development Group when these were, both this and the Edgebrook project were both initially reviewed by Arnett Development.
If you read it, Nelson, I've just got the page. I haven't turned the page while you were talking. It appears that Chief Doyle, who was then the chief of the town police service, was quite comfortable, and he reckoned that two additional patrol officers, costing about $100,000 a body, would be quite enough to handle what's there.
To handle what?
Well, what the effect of the whole site. He was suggesting that two police extra.
Based on call volume
on
anticipated.
call volume, based on the other projects
For
in
both,
Amherst, Merrimack, Bedford, Nashua, and Somersworth.
for both the residential and commercial
Yes,
parts?
all the
of
similar
it?
sort of things, yeah.
Okay. Okay, I just wanted to, I'd like to read the report. Thank you.
Have you anything else?
Not at this time.
Okay, anybody else got any thoughts, comments? Anybody wants to add anything?
Yeah, I would like to.
So,
Not
please,
necessarily
Tanya.
about the, not necessarily about the amount of children that are gonna be coming out of here, but, more along the lines of the layout of what I see. In the other, conceptuals that we saw, the prints that we saw, we had topics about, the layout with the parking in the front or the back. This is all along the front now, along the DW highway. You guys had a revision on one of them, the retail further down, where you kind of swapped it and put all the parking in the back because we raised concerns about how that would look at the highway, on the DW. And now I'm looking at it and you have, it looks like a huge parking lot in the front of the front of the building there.
So- so
I know
this
you
is-
don't necessarily have, you said, occupants yet? Or
Right, so
a
this,
complete
this is,
layout?
this is the previous layout. What you're seeing is the old big box. It just happens to match the square footage. But if it makes the board more comfortable, we can revise it to show what you're speaking of.
Well, actually, if I can just interject here.
Sure.
If you recall, when we actually came conceptually for a commercial development on this side of the project.
For down that
Yeah.
end, right?
Right, and at that time, we actually modified the layout because the feedback we were getting is that the commercial development, you want to have, they want to have exposure along the highway.
That's correct.
And so we were working on modifying the layout so that we could have parking along Daniel Webster Highway. With this type, with a flex industrial type of use, you want to have the parking in the front of the building because the back of the building is active with deliveries and
And
truck
loading docks.
traffic. And so what you're doing is you're basically facing the less intense use, which is the office component towards Daniel Webster Highway, and you're shielding the truck activity and the deliveries from the highway. And frankly, if you remember, part of our dialogue had to do with the St. Cobain property and the fact that nobody wants that to be their front yard. They want the front yard to be Daniel Webster Highway. So you're right, we have modified the layout, but it's been a result of feedback that we've received in trying to put together the most marketable and productive product.
Thank you for that explanation. One other question, I'm sorry I have to ask, but could you explain flex industrial? When you refer to flex, what is it exactly that you mean by that?
Sure.
I'm not sure I understand that.
So basically, what flex space is we're showing, individual units on here that could be, 30 feet wide, they could be 60 feet wide. So you're marketing to, a different, I would say, you can market to different size companies. So the space can be set up in a flexible nature to be marketable to a large range of companies. A lot of times you'll have, an office use up front, and you'll have kind of a manufacturing or a warehousing use out back, and companies can grow in these types of spaces, meaning, you start out small and you might expand into, that next unit, or, relocate to a different size unit on site. So it just hits a larger market for potential users.
Yeah, the flex in flex industrial is the flexibility of the interior configurations of the
Thank
buildings.
you.
Thank you.
I was just not quite sure on that.
So although you've got,
A term I wasn't familiar
if
with.
you've got the three sites shown, you might still modify them, is that what you're saying to us? Or are
Internal.
you definitely going to have those three, if I can use the...
If I can, again, remember that this is the conditional use permit plan. This does not authorize construction. Before any of that happens, they have to come forward with a
Thank you
site
for
plan.
reminding us, yes, thank you.
Absolutely. The intent right now is that these would be the buildings, but certainly as we involve, the architect.
Potential
and
customers.
Things can change to some
Okay.
degree.
Neil, you happy?
Yeah, and one more thing that I'd just like to ask about. So it still shows that there's a retail spot, commercial spot down at the very end, down by the St. Cobain entrance.
That's correct.
And if I understand correctly, the conditional use permit was to incorporate continuity to the whole site when we discussed it. And now I don't know that I see that.
The current development agreement the current development agreement and conditional use permit require that any development south of the St. Cobain driveway, because it was right now commercial, needed to have that pedestrian connection.
South of it.
There was not a condition specific to that area north of the St. Cobain driveway.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Nelson, I see your hand up.
Yeah, more. You reminded me, I hadn't paid attention to this part before, but we are talking about one entrance onto DW Highway, one new entrance onto
No.
DW Highway with this configuration. Is that correct?
No.
No, that's not correct. There's two. We're not proposing any modifications to the entrances to the plan that was approved in 2015. So there's currently the entrance to the multifamily has been built. That was new.
Yeah.
We're proposing an entrance here to this commercial retail. We're anticipating that this may be a signalized intersection. And that's ultimately state determined, but the state kind of gave us the heads up that we could meet the warrants for signalization there. We're proposing a new one here, same location that it was previously proposed, and then we're utilizing that shared access with St. Cobain in that
Yeah.
location there, and that is signalized.
Now, is there pedestrian access possible from the housing portion to, let me ask you, where is the pedestrian access from the housing to these new facilities? You
So-
mentioned that.
If you recall, and it maybe we don't because it's been so much time, what we had talked about initially is rather than building a sidewalk along the entire Daniel Webster Highway, that we would come up with an internal network because it would be more friendly and frankly a better feel for the residents. But this layout is going to be reworked. But as it's shown on this plan, we have a pedestrian connection along the front of the site here, and then it comes around. It actually comes down along the sidewalk here and through the site so that we can run along the front of the properties through here. We cross along the St. Cobain, the shared access here, and then go along the front of the property through this zone here and drop down into that commercial space. So we do have connectivity all the way across the project.
That's what I wanted to be sure.
The internal layout of that and how that is achieved will be subject to site plan approval as we
Okay.
come in
Yeah.
with each pod, but
Okay, I wanted to be sure that was in there.
sure.
Yeah. Do you have to widen the bridge over the brook to add that sidewalk? You're putting a sidewalk over the brook, right?
This area here, the brook actually is under ground through here in
Yeah.
a pipe, the
Uh-huh.
outfall of the pond. So
Yeah.
we would not need a bridge or anything in that location. That's part of the reason why we are dropping in to make the connection through here. It's a little bit tight up here with some of the off-site improvements and so on to fit the walkway along DW Highway. So we're trying to create the best solution for the project.
Okay, when you first went through it, you skipped that part, or I didn't catch it.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
So that connectivity would be down in here. We'd go on the south side of the existing pond. And
Okay, and you talk about adding the fifth building. What would be the conditions under which you would look to add the fifth residential building, or to go ahead with it? I mean, it's already in your plans. What would trigger that? Would we have some
The proposal that the applicant has presented to the board is to eliminate the requirement that a non-residential piece be required for that fifth building, and that based on the positive fiscal impact of that phase, it be allowed to move forward similar to how you've handled both the Monahan and the Edgebrook CUPs.
So this doesn't tie to any of that? This is a separate...
Their proposal is that they would not be required to do a non-residential piece before the fifth building is completed. That is, there's two main parts to this amendment, that being one, and the other, the change from retail in front of St. Gobain to the industrial flex, and not to do the pedestrian connection because it's industrial as a requirement of the development of the fifth building.
Not to do the vehicular connection.
Excuse me, the vehicular connection, I apologize.
I didn't hear the last thing you said.
There would not be the vehicular connection between the residential
Oh,
and the
yeah.
industrial.
Understand that, yeah.
And as I mentioned, my recommendation is based on the need for me to review the fiscal and the information, that we continue this to the 17th to allow me to prepare a formal recommendation.
Does any other member of the board, after that explanation, need other questions? Otherwise, I will throw it open to the public, and if any member of the general public, abutters or just general members of the public would like to offer us any thoughts, please feel free to come forward and talk to us.
Let's see.
Don't forget to sign on the sheet if you will, and tell us what your thoughts are. When you're ready, sign in and let us know what your thoughts. Oh, both of you are coming. Well, both of you fill out the sheet and tell us when you're both settled what your thoughts are. Far away.
So my name's Ashley Tenhave. I live at Webster Green, right across the street
I know
from
where
all
you
of
are.
this. Yes.
Thank you.
So again, not to sound like a broken record, my biggest concern with this is that access road that's going to be right across the street from our entrance.
Yep.
Again, you're going to have people turning in and out of there, in and out of Webster Green, people turning from DW Highway both ways.
Yep.
As it is, it's hard to get out of there left. Now I'm gonna have to fight people turning into their site and turning out of their site both ways.
Yep.
Big, major, huge traffic jam. I mean, this morning it took me 15 minutes to get out of the road because school started again. It's miserable. And our school bus stops right there. You're gonna have this big four-way.
Well, the school bus has to stop there because it's got to back the kids in Webster Green.
Right. So my concern is during drop-off and pickup, you've got, again, people turning every which way.
Yep.
And you've got the bus stop there. I'm just worried about traffic. I'm worried about our kids' safety
Yep.
with having that entrance right there and not having a light or anything else that's going to get people to
Yes, I understand.
stop.
Is that the, you mentioned that a traffic signal, Tim, is that?
When this project were to, if this project gets amended by the board, the next step again would be site plan review, which would require, because our new regulations are now in place.
Yes.
We would have to have a traffic study that meets the requirements of our new regulations that we adopted earlier tonight.
Whilst I'm not asking.
As well as approval from the state, because this is a state jurisdiction of the highway.
I just offer one other thought to you ladies, which obviously would have to be negotiated, but what if the bus was asked, or the bus company was asked to actually turn into Webster Green and then do it?
There's no way for them to turn around. It's very tight right there at the entrance.
You give me the chance, I'll to show you how it's done.
You can figure that out, great. But again, it's still the trying to get in and out of your
I
residential
understand.
place.
I just toss up that as an idea.
Yeah, but we do have a bus, we have a resident that drives the school bus.
Yeah.
And even he says when he has to go home for lunch or something like that, it is very tight for him to get his bus,
Okay,
so.
thank you for the thought. Have you want to offer anything, or are you just saying, here?
Sure. Katie Poirier, I also live in Webster Green.
Pull the microphone towards you.
Sorry. So there's a couple different things. The landscaping, they're proposing now to have all of that greens, like all the trees removed and parking being in front. What is that going to do for the aesthetics of our complex? Like, we have residents whose, like, porch looks out to DW Highway, and at least they get to see some trees. Now, they're going to have industrial. And if they are warranted to have this, then you also have security cameras. How is that going to be affected by them in the industrial having security cameras and it not peeking into homeowners' property? You know what I mean? I'm just saying, like, there's multiple
You've got a valid point.
I also want to bring up to the board, just taking, I know this is outside of their approval and stuff. However, St. Cobain has recently been to our community, and they are now soil sampling for our community because they do believe that we are contaminated.
Yep.
So.
But that's the PFOA, PFOS. Yes, I've read that too.
So not only is it, that they also should take, if they do start digging and such, that's going to bring everything back up into our water and down into our public water well. And 4 and 5 aren't even up and running yet, which they were supposed to before this project was even occupied.
May I just ask for clarification, is Webster Green totally on wells, or is it on?
We're on public.
You're on the public water
Yeah.
supply? Okay.
But still,
I understand.
I mean, the soil, and the reason why is because there's elevated water sampling because,
Oh, I
some of the
understand why.
tests,
You don't have to explain it. No.
it's just scary because, if they're going to start digging and all that stuff come up,
But
I'm
if they're
immune to it.
digging
I'm
there,
gonna
how
go.
does it affect the water supply, which can come from anywhere else where the town was? And the town, as we know, is spending a lot of money
Yeah.
putting in extra things to clean the water out.
Right, and now we're gonna spend an additional, our tax dollars are now gonna have to pay for additional 2 cops based off of their financial analysis. The people that are gonna be moving in aren't taxpayers.
No, but if you listen to what Mr. Walker said, and I'm not
And I know,
qualified.
we're not really-
He's saying that because whatever they do, the town will be better off by, I think it was $500,000, but I can't remember what the numbers are straight off. So in other words, it isn't an extra load on the taxpayer. They're actually taking some of the load. They're paying for all the extra facilities and still contributing to the town. That is what this fiscal analysis is supposed to show. But we'll check with him in a minute.
Well, we'll hope that's what Tim comes up with.
All right? And can I ask you to sign in?
I did sign in.
You have signed in?
Yes, my name is Jan Jones, and I live in Webster Green also. And my condo, the townhouse, my back of it faces Daniel Webster Highway.
Yes.
It's fortunate, right now I'm looking at a tree line, tall. I don't even see St. Cobain. Unfortunately, this proposed plan is going to change that a lot. I'll be looking at cars or lights or people walking, and I barbecue out back, I know. I don't need everybody seeing what I'm doing. Not that I'm doing anything, nefarious.
I'm not suggesting, yes.
It's just,
But I thought, pardon me for ignorance, but I thought from driving along Daniel and Webster Highway that most of Webster Green has got your own trees.
No.
no.
No. All right, so you're relying on the trees across the way. Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Now, there is a berm that is on Webster Green side, but it definitely,
There's high and low points.
there's high and low points.
I understand, thank you.
I just don't want to see any more buildings going up.
It's gonna ruin your property
It's going to lose my
value.
property value, and I better move quick. And I mean, move. I just got to find a place to go. And I concur with everything that Katie has said, because I just don't need that. That's not why I moved to Merrimack. I moved because it was nice and there were trees and it was a 2-lane road. And now we've got, I mean, how many apartments are in those 5 buildings, are going to be? 240. 240. That's another 240 cars if everybody takes 1 car. But they're 2-bedroom apartments.
And that's only the apartments, that's not the industrial. So we talk industrial trucks, we're gonna talk more traffic, especially in the mornings and in the evenings, because they're gonna either load or unload. We already have contaminated area. What kind of vendors are they gonna have in there? They're gonna have paint, they're gonna have, Havoc. How are they gonna dispose of all those chemicals? It's just a lot of things that we already have a problem there.
All right, I hear your thoughts. Okay.
In addition, I don't know why we need more retail on Daniel Webster, when if you go down the road just a little bit, there's a 24-hour fitness club, there's some kind of Moose brewing place, I don't know what it's called. And some of those spaces are still empty, so we need more?
Well, I think actually if you were to visit that development, Merrimack 360, I think you'll find there's only one unoccupied unit now. And they're in fact actually
What
building...
about the commons? What about the commons, where Tractor Supply is? Why
I
is
don't
that
know
all
the
dead?
answer to that one. I take your point, ladies. If there's anything else constructive, we'll ask Mr. Walker and Mr. Brannan to respond to your thoughts.
And Kevin, just so, like, you
Please,
are aware, sorry.
You have to go to the chair.
Don't talk to
okay.
him.
So, okay, so building 5, just as sheer of caution, the vibration from the train is probably gonna hurt that building, because I lived in that neighborhood next to where these are going.
Yes.
And you could put so many nails on your picture to hang up on that wall. That was vibrating down all the time.
This is from the construction?
No, I'm saying from the train driving through. I mean, if it's full, there's a lot of vibration, and I'm not living there. I'm just saying that it's something for them to think of.
Okay, thank you. All right, ladies, thank you very much. Is there anything else for the general public? I'll close the public session and invite Mr. Chan and Mr. Walker to come back and comment on what you've heard.
You want me to?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Okay, Chad?
I would just like to point out, Mr. Chairman, that when we went through the conditional use permit process back in 2015, we had a pretty significant traffic study done. We understand that
Yep.
would need to be updated. But that contemplated a lot of off-site improvements that would be required as part of this project that's ultimately going to help the traffic flow and how, how things occur along Daniel Webster Highway. So there's improvements that are contemplated with the development of this project as it relates to the traffic. Along those same topics, the industrial use in this location is going to have a less of an impact on traffic. So I think that particular access or entrance, if you will, I'm just looking for my laser here. This particular entrance will have, less traffic going through it as it relates to the way we're distributing the use across the property right now. So I think that will ultimately show up in a future traffic situation. The flex industrial use is a permitted use in this zone right now.
I know that.
Without the conditional use permit regardless. So this area of town is supposed to be developed in that fashion. So we obviously have to meet certain requirements, landscaping requirements and so on, and we look forward to addressing those details as part of the site plan process. But I think it's important to understand that this is where this type of use is supposed to be in the town of Merrimack. So
Yep.
we do believe that the plan that we're presenting is very consistent with the master plan and the objectives of, of the town at this point. I think it's important to point out, and I appreciate you addressing the fiscal impact, that yes, the fiscal impact does account for some additional costs that we're anticipating as a result of this development, but that the overall impact is going to be a net positive to the town, and we look forward to, that report being reviewed and, feedback coming from, town staff accordingly. I'm just going down through just to make sure I touched on, I made some notes on a few of the comments. More retail, I mean, we're actually not proposing more retail as it relates to what was previously approved
I
on
agree.
the site. So it's a very similar layout. We are, kind of condensing that towards the residential development at this time. And I think that this area will function quite well because, again, we'll have a dedicated access to that. So
If I can interrupt you, Chad, and based on what you're both contemplating, that's going to necessitate another amendment to this conditional use permit to show the new layout of what that retail will be
Absolutely.
once. So there is, that section is still, right now, basically a placeholder.
absolutely, yeah, thank you.
Thank
But
you
it-
for that.
But I think it's, this is organizing the uses accordingly, and I think the layout actually works in favor of traffic and, the off-site improvements and so on, the way that things are being positioned and shown on the plan. I felt like there was one more thing, but I'll hand it off to Kevin and see if I can find my note here.
Kevin?
Is there anything else that you wanted to add to that? Right. Certainly with the, the layout that we have, there will be landscaping requirements and screening requirements along the front of the property. The topography of the site does kind of fall off from Daniel Webster Highway, so the site will be somewhat lower than the highway, so I think there's going to be some topography benefits as far as it's not like we're going to be looking straight across the road or vice versa, but we will have landscaping as part of our design, when we come forward with a site plan submission for, every phase of the project, but certainly along that corridor, we would anticipate that.
Okay. Anything else you want to add, gentlemen? Any other member of the board? Mr. Boyd?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Has there been any discussion of what you're envisioning for the light industrial parcels that you're proposing along DW Highway?
Nothing specific. Basically, Chad kind of summed it up last time. It's a flex space, so if we've got a user that's looking for 3,000 square feet, we'll be able to put them in there. If somebody's looking for 5,000 square feet, we'll be able to get them in there. It's
mean-
not meant to be a single standing 20,000 square foot, single unit.
In other words, you're not pigeonholing yourself into one specific use.
Correct.
You're exercising the flex and flex.
Absolutely.
So you could have a lab that does outpatient work for all the various hospitals that you collect specimens there and they go, and then next door it could be a machine shop.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tim. Okay. Follow up, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, please, go on.
The state road, and then this may not be something that you can answer, maybe something that Tim has to answer, but what are the expectations that the state is gonna have in terms of oversight, in terms of review, in terms of what the state's gonna need to look at in order to authorize that particular, for those buildings to go in? I'm assuming they're gonna need to get permission for a curb cut to accommodate that intersection. I mean, is
There'll
that-
need to be updated driveway permits, and
Okay.
that's where the traffic impact study portion of the state's review comes in.
Okay.
Is they condition their driveway permits based on their traffic analysis and the comments of the state.
Okay, are they gonna require Any further traffic impact study outside of what was alluded to that was done back in 2015?
Yes, our own regulations now require it for every site plan.
That's what I thought, okay. So we're gonna get a second bite
Yes, we will.
at the traffic numbers?
Yes.
Okay. The one thing that did pop out to me, and I thank the neighbors from Webster Green illustrating that, is just the parking lot along Daniel Webster Highway. I don't think what they're asking is unreasonable for some type of buffering, some type of landscaping that mutes the parking spaces along there so that, you know, you don't have parking, you don't have cars that are sitting up on top of the road. You know, there's, to me, just looking at this, there's gotta be something there that provides some screening, that offers some type of visual relief for the people that have to look out at Webster Green on a daily basis, so.
If I can, Mr. Boyd, just another reminder that what this plan is and what the conditional use permit does is set forth the basic size and uses and where they're located on the site. The specific of landscaping, traffic, site design, circulation, that's all site plan. This approval, should the board grant an amendment to this CUP, does not authorize them to build a single thing. And the details associated with that landscaping are all dealt with at the site plan level.
I understand, I just,
Yep,
I want
sure.
to get first bite at the apple, but
Absolutely.
I appreciate you clarifying for me, Tim, I appreciate it. It's really the immediate thoughts I have. I'm not gonna lie to you, I am really concerned about how Daniel Webster Highway has continued to be built up along that corridor. It is very difficult to drive that road. Maybe not during the quiet hours of the day between 10 and 2, but obviously in the morning and the late evening. The type of volume that is on that road at any given time, I think in general, is concerning. So I'm cautiously optimistic to see what, you know, should we approve tonight, cautiously optimistic to see what you're going to bring forth to us for further review.
And we understand, we understand the abutters' concerns, we understand the board's concerns, and we'll make sure that we've got something up there to make it well landscaped and put a decent screen up for.
And I'll mention it again, as of tonight, we have new regulations and new landscaping requirements, so.
Yep, I know that
I think
as
that
well.
will really serve this area well.
Okay.
With the screening requirements that go with parking lots.
I appreciate the clarity, Tim, thank you.
Has anybody else got any comments from the board? Mr. Disco?
Yeah, just to follow up on what Bill has talked about here, that was one of my thoughts too. I was kind of under the impression that when you made the improvements you did make to DW Highway I thought that included some advanced thinking on other parts, but apparently it does not.
No,
Is
it
that
does.
The overall traffic study that it was done for the CUP initially in 2015 contemplates far more in terms of off-site improvements. When you did the individual site plan for Gilbert Crossing alone, the state couldn't require all of those other things because those items weren't on the table at that time. Only what was presented at the site plan level was what the state could react to and require.
For instance, the
improvements for.
retail is gonna require traffic light and turning lanes.
Okay.
Same if there's any other access points.
I just
they're
wanted to
gonna
understand that and be clear about it.
And
Okay.
we have right-of-way widenings, you know,
Yeah.
for the property, and there's a lot of off-site improvements that, similar to the CUP being phased, the off-site improvements are somewhat phased as well, because you have to trigger those requirements along the way.
Yeah. Okay, I wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Okay.
Just one quick thing.
Yeah,
Just that, and I forget who mentioned it, Mrs. Jones, regarding PFAS and soil. I'm assuming that with the Gilbert Crossing, there was monitoring and things like that through NEDS. Is that going to continue with this other site?
Yeah, what DES required us to do was to keep all material on site, not to cart any off, and if we hit groundwater, to do some monitoring of it.
Right.
we didn't hit any groundwater on this particular, for the apartments. We may further to the north, depending on the soil type. But yes, DES is still got a watchful eye over the entire site, including what we're doing.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that, just
Yes.
so,
Yep.
you know, for the women that came up to the front, so, thanks.
And we will need permits through DES, so they will ultimately review the plans and I'm
Given the
sure-
circumstances, I cannot believe that DES will not be doing it. They are going to be on your neck morning, night, and noon because of the issues of PFOA.
They were for the
it's-
apartments.
Yeah, it's very
Yeah.
active, and the communication is very good
Yep.
between, the
Okay.
the John
Well,
Flatley
thank you.
Company and DES, so we look forward to continuing to work on the site.
Has anybody else got any further thoughts?
I'm happy to hear the developer say that, because in my experience with DES, with Commissioner Frizey and the rest of his team, you're absolutely, I mean, the transparency and the communication between them has always been second to none. So I hope that continues as you move forward.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Lord. Based on the recommendation we have from the staff, I think we are all agreeing, but I obviously wait my colleagues to support it, that we're going to continue this matter till September the 17th to enable us to review the financial impact statement and for them to develop the amendment to the proposed amendment that Mr. Thompson has indicated. Is that what the flavour of the meeting?
Move approval, Mr. Chairman, to continue to September 17th.
I thank you. Can I have a second to that motion? Second. Thank you so much. That's motion there is that we will continue this matter till September the 17th, if that agreeable with you, at 7 p.m. In this room and with no further notice to abutters. Oh, we're going to take a vote. All in favour, say aye.
Aye.
Against? That's 1, 2, 3, 6, 0.
Thank you very much.
Thank you both very much indeed
Thank
for
you,
your
gentlemen.
time and spent. And I will therefore request our chairman to come and join us. Thank you. Thank you, ladies. And I'm sorry it's been continued, but I think you'll probably be happy that it is, and we'll see you on the 17th. Look forward to that.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, for conducting that item on our agenda. And I will resume the gavel, and that brings us to item 7 on our agenda, which is discussion and possible action regarding other items of concern. Does any member of the board have any discussion items to bring forward? Neil?
I have one, and I ask this because I'm not quite sure as to how how the town, or if we have any say in this, but as I drive through town, I notice properties that are either waiting to be developed or waiting to be fixed up, or maybe neglected or abandoned, if that, and it's an eyesore, I guess, if you will. Right on the Daniel Webster, across from Reed's Ferry Market, that property's way overgrown and it's an eyesore. There's properties on Back River Road. There's properties out off of Babusick. And I don't know if that's something that, how would we address that, or how would we go about maybe?
We can't through our existing land use regulations. We don't have a property maintenance code in town. If there were to be one, that would be an action of the town council under the general code.
So the first step would be to approach the council about it?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the only thing we have jurisdiction on is if something were to reach the definition of a junkyard, and there could be enforcement action, but there's a pretty high threshold in order to get to that definition.
Right, right. Okay.
Don't ask me, I'm not the chairman.
I'd like to add a comment to Neil's comment.
Please do. Why not?
Okay, my name is Ben Niles. I live at 11 Fernwood Drive. And to underscore what Neil's saying, it's not just that, it also goes into purely residential neighborhoods. I have a house that is 3 lots from my house, and it appears that the property's been abandoned, and there are weeds 3 feet high. This is insane. This is absolutely insane. And there has to be responsibility borne by the owners or the mortgagees to maintain properties to a reasonable standard. And maybe it's time we ask town council to consider promulgating such a regulation. It makes our town look bad. It's not right.
Thank you for the comment.
Thank you.
Thank you for the comment. You won't find disagreement from me.
If I would concur with what you're saying. Particularly if you looked at followed the little incident over, I think it's in Salem, with the gentleman who dropped 10 million printers and printer boxes and everything else.
Yes.
It sort of brought that home to me. But if you look at the problem Salem had in getting anything done about it, I suspect we shall have to bully our town council long and hard, and they'll have some terrible troubles achieving it.
Well, it's a complicated thing, and I appreciate your comment. I do have to sort of limit the discussion a little bit because we don't, as a board, have a public comment period, but I wanted to respect your willingness to engage us on the subject. But we do have to sort of move to the discussion among the board members among these items. So thank you for making the suggestion of the information.
Okay, so I don't have the ability to raise any other items.
No, the planning board does
Come
not.
talk to us Thursday night, September 12th, Ben.
Yep. The town council does have a public comment period on its agenda. The planning and zoning boards, and probably many of the others don't have a public comment feature to their represent, other than in relation to holding hearings on individual
We're limited to
applications.
what we agenda for land use items.
Yep.
Point
So-
of personal privilege, Mr.
Yes, please.
The town council has public comment at the beginning, at the end of the meeting. You can talk about whatever you want to talk about.
Okay.
Whether it's something on the item, something going on in town. The only thing that we ask, if there's anything related to personnel, as it relates to personnel in the town,
No.
that be a private conversation with the town manager. That's the only exception to the rule, because we can't get into personnel matters in public. But if you have something relating to the, anything that relates to economic development, business, quality of life, anything along those lines, town council provides ample opportunity, both, as I said, both at the beginning and the end of our meetings. We'll be meeting Thursday night, September 12th at 7 o'clock, and would love to have you, Ben.
I'll be there.
Okay, sounds good. See
Thank you
then.
for that. I think that when you get into some of the questions about apparent abandoned properties, there are sort of the limitations that we've discussed, but there are some investigation or some follow-up items that each of us could individually do. If there's a particular property that affects yours, you can certainly investigate whether the current owner has been paying their taxes, or whether it's been sort of the taxes are behind, and potentially the town would take some action on that regard based on non-payment of taxes. If there's certainly a mortgagee, they have some interest in the property and taking it and being involved in it, and someone stops paying their mortgage, they'll take over it.
Unfortunately, all those processes take quite a lot of time.
I'm sure they do.
Yeah, they absolutely do. And I think that when you talk about the crazy property in Salem with the printers and things that border on junkyards, you'll find some sympathy with the town councilors who don't want to see that kind of thing develop here. I'm not quite sure whether our Yankee frugality and conservative approach to things would have us requiring people keep their lawn to a particular height or level or mowing frequency kind of thing, but general maintenance and storage of things that are not normally part of yard would certainly be something people are interested in, health and safety. And the printer problem, I think, in Salem has also raised issues with pollutants that leak out of printers and the damage that comes from that, and a tremendous amount of styrofoam that was related to that particular storage site. So there are reasons to be interested in it.
I believe the cost to the town of Salem was pretty astronomical.
Yeah, well, you know, when you get into polluted sites like this and crazy things that happen, the cost of it almost becomes secondary, because if the owners truly abandoned it, you could ask them to pay for whatever, and they're not doing it. I mean, they've already walked away from the property. And so
That's true.
it is what it is. They're not going to. And for the most part, I don't know who the crazy printer guy was, but I don't think he would have the money that it would take to haul that stuff away.
Oh, no, he didn't. No. He was a long way behind in his town taxes as well.
Yeah, I mean, whatever that huge dollar amount was, very complicated things. You'll also probably hear as a part of that story the legal costs that the town's incurred just trying to pursue and raise that issue, and that is a concern as well. Anyway, complicated issues. I'm glad to sort of send it over towards the town council. No, not my daytime job. It's Bill's daytime job, or at least his Thursday nighttime job. Any other comments or questions regarding other items of concern?
Yes.
Paul?
Mr. Chair, this one's more for Tim. I've gotten multiple complaints from various parties dealing with one certain property in town that seems to be operating a business in a residential area of more of an industrial nature. I just want to know where I can point them to go to report this, deal with it in some fashion.
Both on the website or in my office, we have what's called a service request form. Once one of those is filled out, we put it in the queue for enforcement review.
Thank you, Tim.
Paul, one of the things that I also keep in mind with that is, as a board member and sort of a representative, if I encounter someone who's a little shy about filling out the form themselves, I often offer to fill it out for them and put my name on it as the complainter or the
that was
person
going to be my
turning it
next
in.
question, because I did tell them.
It does
go
require
to-
public.
That's what I'm
you have
saying.
to-
Go to Tim's office, but it's one of those things, we want to start anything, we don't want to put our name on it, kind of stuff, so.
Usually when I do that, I'm willing to put my name on somebody else's information just so that the thing gets brought forward. Obviously, I verify that it's accurate and true, and I don't sort of jump on anything somebody says, but I'm willing to bring forward a complaint under my name that keeps somebody from having to do it under their own name.
If you're looking on the website, it'll be under the planning and zoning section,
Thank
under
you.
community development.
Thank you, Tim.
Nelson, you had a comment.
Yeah, a couple things. One, last time we brought up this business with the Office of State Planning, the legal, I'm sorry, the legal group.
NHMA's,
What?
Yeah.
the law lecture
Municipal
series now
Association.
becoming a law lecture workshop.
Yeah, it's now
It's
become a
NHMA,
long
yep.
work. I tried to sign up for it, and I wanted the town to pay for it. And that doesn't seem to be user-friendly.
Touch base with either Sharon or Rhonda in my office. They'll register you through our office.
Okay.
That way, it gets handled that way.
Okay, I didn't know how to do it
Just
without
touch base with
paying
Rhonda
for
or
it,
Sharon.
and I didn't
They'll
know
take care of
to
it for
pay
you.
Thank
You
you.
missed the beginning of our meeting. We touched that one already.
Oh, did you?
Yes.
Oh.
But that's
I'll-
okay. It's
I'm going to hit another one that I missed the front part of your meeting. I presume you had the public hearing and went ahead with your adoptions and so on.
We
of
did.
The new regulations. I remembered something after our discussions earlier on this subject, that one of the things that we had done in the past with our regulations is we ran them by town council just for review and knowledge, and also if there's anything in there that he didn't feel he could defend or whatever. And we made that a practice, and we're now getting away from that. I don't know how you feel. I not disparaging your legal abilities or any way, but it was some way to just sort of protect the town or have the town's attorney on board with us on these regulations. The same with zoning articles and so on.
It's no disparagement to me. When I review these things, I review them as the board chair, as member of the planning board.
Yeah.
I don't put I don't represent the town. And
Yeah.
so I don't
Yeah.
assume that role and kind of
Yeah.
put on that mantle of looking at it that way. I mean, you can't obviously close your mind off to things that you see,
Yeah.
but I don't review it with with an eye towards this
understand.
is my client and what's their interests kind of thing. I would suspect that there may have been some legal review of some of the MS4 type language that had to be added to things, but I don't know. Tim, what did we do, and what do you sort of think or recommend on that?
For
Approach or
an
practice.
issue, I can understand where Nelson's coming from. I also know that the basis for these regulations is something that I did over 15 years ago that had legal review at the time. And given the fact that we're not proposing anything that isn't authorized under state statute, I didn't see, frankly, the need, given my experience and my comfort level with these regulations, to bring them to the town attorney. There have been instances, the most recent example I can think of was the dispensary zoning amendments we did. Those obviously, because that's new state law and intricate things that I don't have 20-plus years of experience with, yes, I would bring something like that to the town legal counsel. But for something like site plan regulations, where I've got 23 years of experience and have written probably over 50 different amendments and regulation updates during the course of my career, if there's anything I have question on, I certainly always would bring it to legal counsel, but I did not feel the need to spend the town's resources on something I felt very comfortable handling.
There wasn't anything that I reviewed in it that set off my alarms in terms of having the town's legal counsel pay special attention to the review of it. The things that we're talking about regulating and site plans with lighting and parking and spaces and dimensions and those sorts of things are such garden variety planning board activities. If we were getting into, signage and content of signage, obviously you start thinking about First Amendment and free speech and what are your limitations on those kinds of things. But the kinds of things that set off the concerns are pretty big landmarks, religious uses or, those kinds of things.
Which is good.
Those kinds of things are kind of well-established landmarks where hey, I'm in a sensitive area. But many, many, many of the things that we do about, driveway widths and, landscaping and things are just so well-worn paths that raise a lot of concern for me. The other part of that comment or question is that planning boards hardly ever get in trouble for what they wrote in their regulations. They usually get in trouble for not following what they wrote in their regulations, It's usually step 2 of the process.
Or people interpret them differently. That's the other thing. But
potentially so. But thank
my
you for the
advice
comment or suggestion.
That's what it is.
Well, we'll also, Tim's going to work on the subdivision regulations, and we can also all review them with the same view towards are the things in here that jump out at us as being something new or innovative or complicated that are worthy of having that special attention. I don't mind accessing the legal services whenever we think that we need to. At the same time, I don't want to run every single thing up a flagpole that comes with a price tag. And then when we have competing interests for staff in the department or membership with the municipal association, the end of the question is, boy, I wish the budget could shoulder it. And nobody would ever directly tie the two things together and say, well, you spent $10,000 on legal fees. Wouldn't it be great if you
there's
could do
one
that?
thing I've tried to be in my 8 years as community development director, it's trying to be as frugal as I can with the limited resources I have in my budget. And I don't like to spend money frivolously one way or the other on anything that I don't feel is absolutely necessary to be spent on.
Appreciate it. Bill?
And I'm sure Tim can allude to this, but I know as a best practice that our town manager does the same thing as well. She's not going to pick up and call town council without doing her own due diligence, because every time she picks up the phone, it's a billable hour. And those billable hours add up. Even if it's just 5 minutes, that's 5 minutes is 15 in bill, and this is 15 minutes in billable hour world, so, anyway, I appreciate it.
You never want to sort of discourage seeking legal advice when it's necessary, but don't do it as a matter of routine unless you've got a flat fee deal with somebody. Those aren't really that around very more. Other discussion and possible action regarding items of concern? I don't have any myself, and so that moves us on our agenda to the approval of the minutes of August 20th, 2019. What's the will of the board?
Mr. Chairman, move approval of the Merrimack Planning Board minutes of Tuesday, August 20th, 2019, as presented.
Seconded, I would second that motion, Mr. Chairman.
Motion and second to approve the minutes of August 20th as printed. Are there any comments or discussion? If not, what's the will of the board? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstaining? 1 of 2 abstentions, Neil and Paul. So that is 502 to approve those minutes. That concludes all the business on our agenda for
Chairman, I
this
make a
night.
motion that we adjourn.
Seconded.
Motion by Alistair, second by Councillor Boyd. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? 700, we're adjourned. Thank you all very much for the hard work tonight, and please don't forget to turn your microphone off.